listeners, welcome to episode 90 of Cell and Gene, the podcast. I'm Erin Harris. Thanks for tuning in. If you listened to episode 88, which featured my discussion with KG Therapeutics CEO and ISCT's President Miguel Forte, you know I had the pleasure of recording episodes on site at ARM's 2024 meeting on the Mesa. This episode is another really interesting conversation from that event in which I sat down with ARM's COO, Rita Johnson-Greene. Rita's background reflects a remarkable blend of academic excellence, industry leadership, and significant contributions to the advancement of cell and gene therapies. Her career progression, which we do get into a little bit during our chat, demonstrates consistent growth and impact in the healthcare and biotech sectors, making her CV truly, truly outstanding in the field. She and I talk not only about meeting in the Mesa itself, but also some of the critically important things she's working on and her take on some of the major topics affecting the space, including globalization's impact on patient access and what that actually means in the joint clinical assessment in Europe and its potential impact on cell and gene therapies, and what the industry can expect in the near future based on what was covered and shared during this year's meeting. All right, well, enough from me. I'm going to let you go and listen to my conversation with ARM's COO, Rita Johnson-Greene. Enjoy. Hi, Rita. Welcome back. Thanks for being on Cell and Gene podcast. I'm happy you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Good. So last year when we talked a little bit about the fact that you're a Drexel alum. I'm in the greater Philadelphia area. What we didn't really get to was the absolutely fantastic companies you've been with prior to ARM, and you've held high-ranking positions on teams, including commercial leaderships at places such as Spark and Bluebird, AstraZeneca. And so what I'd like to know is, how have your previous professional experiences helped shape your current role as ARM's Chief Operating Officer?
No, thank you. Thank you so much for your kind words, Erin. As you mentioned, prior to ARM, I was the Vice President of Sales and Treatment Center Alliances at Bluebird Bio, and I was responsible for patient identification as well as curating the patient journey with the treatment centers. And I've been very deliberate about using the word with the treatment centers, curating the patient journey with the treatment centers, because every treatment center is different. It's hopefully a long-standing partnership that you're developing with that treatment center. And so you can't expect the treatment center to do your bidding, right? And so it really is a partnership when you're crafting those relationships. I've also spent almost 5 years at Spark Therapeutics, and I was the head of commercial operations during the launch of Luxturna, which enabled me to understand the data analytics behind launching a gene therapy and using predictive analytics to find ultra-rare patients. And then lastly, I transitioned into a customer-facing role while at Spark, working to get every patient treated by developing and deploying various functional resources. And I also spent about 10 years at AstraZeneca working in finance and sales. And so this kind of amalgamation of all of these roles really enabled me to, one, better connect with, and then two, be a resource to companies that are preparing for commercialization within the cell and gene therapy space. And so I truly feel that I'm making a difference within the sector. I understand the importance of aligning the commercialization claims that you plan to make with your clinical trial design. And I've done both in vivo and ex vivo gene therapy, and I understand the nuances associated with both. And lastly, I enjoy leveraging my sales background to communicate the benefits of ARM membership, as well as attracting new members, and communicating the value of the cell and gene therapy sector, right, and its life-changing and life-saving promise. Mm-hmm. So I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to serve as the COO of ARM.
Excellent. We'll dive a little bit deeper into ARM as we kind of go through the conversation. But first, I want to talk a little bit about how globalization impacts patient access. So certainly on Cell and Gene, we talk all the time about patient access, globalization too, but they're really big, broad terms. And so I'd love to hear from you. How can we as an industry make really incremental steps toward improved patient access, that are meaningful and sort of take a really big,
broad topic and make it smaller and more digestible?
Yeah, no, great question. So this is a topic that is very important to ARM and related to the ethics and society work that our CEO, Tim Hunt, has spearheaded with our members. Within our Ethics and Society project, we have a special focus on global access to cell and gene therapy. This topic is important because for some of the diseases currently targeted by cell and gene therapy, most patients are outside of the high-income regions of the world where we are seeing early-stage commercialization. And so, for example, with sickle cell, most of the patients are outside of the U.S. and the EU, right, with heavy patient populations in Nigeria, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and in India. And so it's important to explore ways to ensure that patients can access these transformative treatments, and we're likely to see increased commercial interest in expanding to these countries. ARM has been focusing on how the sector can industrialize to achieve greater global access and has developed a framework of what the road ahead looks like. And so I'll just tell you a little bit about ARM's framework. It's a time-bound framework that starts with where we are now, where we're headed in the next 10 years, and then 2035 and beyond. Nice. And so with regard to where we're headed now, where we are now, the early days of global access, most products for market use are being approved in the EU, the US, as well as East Asia. Society is currently figuring out how these therapies can best fit into a healthcare system that hasn't yet adopted to them. However, there are examples of gene therapies reaching patients globally, and one great example is Zolgensma. This is a gene therapy that treats spinal muscular atrophy, SMA, type 1, and it's currently available in 50 plus countries. And Novartis has been implementing a global access program so patients in countries like Brazil and India can have access to these therapies. So now to transition into the next 10 years, the sector is advancing how it currently develops and manufactures cell and gene therapies, which will result in innovations that can act as drivers to industrialization. Some examples include improved automation, enhanced analytics, and increased competition. These drivers to industrialization can enable greater productivity, scale, and cost effectiveness, and help achieve global access. Pursuing in vivo cell and gene therapies can also ease the burden of administering them to patients and provide more options in countries that lack infrastructure for ex vivo.
Okay, so I think everything you just discussed are in fact some of the things that are being discussed at this year's meeting on the Mesa. And so what I would love to hear from you would be, some of the major topics and trends being covered at this year's event, and perhaps even some of the key takeaways from this event that people can anticipate impacting the sector in, say, the next year or so.
No, excellent. Thank you. And what I'll do is bucket my comments into various key themes, right? So the first being the regulatory outlook for cell and gene therapy. And so this year we brought in a number of high-level speakers, including former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb and Nicole Verdun, the current director of the Office of Therapeutic Products, a new FDA super office. And both have shed light on how the FDA is adjusting to a growing wave of cell and gene therapies. And so some of the key takeaways from Scott Gottlieb were his optimism that money will come back flowing into the sector, right, into the cell and gene therapy sector with more approvals and with the excitement of tackling more prevalent diseases like Parkinson's disease and diabetes. He also talked about the importance of ensuring strong regulatory oversight over stem cell clinics so that they don't proliferate. And so one of the things that Nicole Verdun that really that struck me, and I mean she's been so amazing every time that she speaks, but she was talking about some of the flexibility that the FDA has been exhibiting when it comes to some of the more recent approvals, as well as platform technologies that they've been looking into, and so she said we we want this field to be successful just as much as you do. And when you think about, some of the relationships that, some companies, the way that they may think of FDA, it's not always as a partner. And so just to hear her, and she said this to an entire room full of cell and gene therapy, companies and organizations and CDMOs, that yes, the FDA really wants this sector to be just as successful as we do for patients.
For sure.
And so I think that, we're starting to see and feel some of that partnership theme in the way that they're responding to, to new products. One of the next themes is investment and commercialization. It's about, it's really been like a tough year, for fundraising, right? Actually, a tough few years for fundraising, right? And there have been challenges with some of the gene therapy launches, right? And this is a big focus for ARM, and we have a panel dedicated to these topics at Meeting on the Mesa. Another theme is scientific innovation. Mesa brings together some of the best minds from leading therapeutic developers. We're hosting 2 science slams on neurological diseases and cardiovascular diseases to explore how the sector is breaking into these indications. We're also hearing from scientific leaders, such as Dr. Shataka. He's the Chief Science Officer at Astellas, about what they are pioneering for rare diseases, and from leading gene editing companies, executives, and about what the field is doing next. We're also talking about how we tackle the challenges of rare and ultra-rare diseases. Mm-hmm. Cell and gene therapies have the potential to help patients with ultra-rare diseases. However, business models for these approaches are often really challenging. And so we have a number of speakers and panels that are breaking into that topic as well. And then lastly, but most importantly, the patient perspective, right? Patients truly are the North Star at ARM. And so we've had a great relationship in seeking insights from patients who've undergone cell and gene therapies, with several high-level sessions that are upcoming. This includes a spotlight session with Bradley Watts, and he's a patient who received Kymriah for his cancer, and Jimmy Olahair, who received Casgevy and now approved CRISPR therapy for sickle cell disease. And so lastly, you asked me about some key takeaways. And, a few are, we will have more commercialization learnings from another year of sickle cell therapies, as well as, Elevidys and CAR T therapies being on the market. And that'll be helpful when as it relates to, the proliferation of cell and gene therapies. We'll also hear more about the FDA's plan for pilot programs like the START program, right, which encourages early stage interactions between the FDA and developers focused on rare diseases. There are plans for establishing platform technologies and efforts to promote more regulatory convergence between the U.S. and other geographies. And this is also a huge effort that ARM is a part of. And we, of course, will hear from investors on their outlook for the capital markets, which we hope will continue to improve.
For sure. Okay, so as a senior leader at ARM, you've been involved in policy and advocacy efforts. So I'd like for you to share with us some of your insight on the joint clinical assessment in Europe and its potential impact on cell and gene therapies.
First, I want to note that ARM has a great public affairs team in Europe spearheading this issue, and that listeners should contact Paolo Marghesi. He is our Vice President of Public Affairs in Europe. And this is if you want to learn more about our public affairs strategy or engage with us on a key topic regarding public affairs. So let's start with a brief background on the EU Joint Clinical Assessment for Health Technology Assessments. A health technology assessment, HTA, is a process used to evaluate the clinical and cost effectiveness of new therapies. The EU's HTA regulation will establish a joint clinical assessment process for the whole EU to begin in 2025 January. The JCA was designed with the potential to reduce duplicative HTA reviews and accelerate patient access to transformative therapies. Traditional HTA processes are based on randomized clinical control trials to evaluate the effectiveness of a new therapy compared to the existing standard of care or a placebo. ATMPs, or advanced therapy medicinal products, that often receive regulatory approval based on evidence demonstrated with single-arm trials, as randomized control trials are not possible for ethical or practical reasons. So let me tell you what's happened thus far. The joint clinical assessment methods proposed in 2023 would have potentially led to inconclusive assessments for gene therapies authorized based on single-arm trials. Without a significant modernization of methods, JCA will not work for ATMPs and will further limit access to transformative therapies in Europe. And so now that begs the question, what is ARM doing? ARM has been advocating for a flexible approach to assessing ATMPs under the JCA, or Joint Clinical Assessment process, and co-launched an advocacy coalition in June of 2024 with Cancer Patient Europe and Foundation Telethon, which now consists of 35 nonprofits, actually more than 35 nonprofits at this point, nonprofits, patient groups, scientific societies, as well as research foundations. And so we're pleased to see that the European Commission has taken steps to clarify and reassure the acceptability of evidence from single-arm trials and real-world evidence from assessing ATMPs. And while this is a positive step, the text of the methodological guidance on direct and indirect comparisons has not changed. And so there's still uncertainty about whether JCA assessors will apply the conservative methodological approach of the guidance. And so ARM will continue to ensure that the methodological flexibility will be implemented in practice when the first JCA of ATMPs are conducted next year.
Excellent. Okay. Excellent. And next year, hopefully we can sit down again at meeting on the Mesa 2025 and we can have an update on that as well.
Absolutely.
Last but certainly not least, before I let you go, I want an update on ARM's Grow internship program. So last year when we talked, the interns were here. They were on site back in Carlsbad because we're in a new location this year. What can we expect in 2025 from Grow? And not more importantly, but just as importantly, how can Cell and Gene, the podcast listeners, and Cell and Gene's audience interact with, help with the Grow internship program?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. One of the things that I mentioned last year when we first met, Erin, was that the Grow internship was one of the key reasons that I joined ARM. And so it is really, it's extremely important to me, to give opportunities to students so that they can be exposed to the cell and gene therapy space. And so same as last year, we have our Grow interns here, which is phenomenal. We're going to be celebrating them in the general session tomorrow morning. We have 20 Grow interns that are sponsored by 16 companies, which is our largest cohort yet. So extremely excited. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Grow internship program, it provides crucial early career paid summer internship opportunities in the regenerative medicine sector to talented undergraduate and graduate students whose backgrounds and life experiences have shaped their unique perspectives. By focusing on applicants' personal journey, the program aims to foster diversity and build community with regard to cell and gene therapy. And so, ultimately, ARM believes that this diversity of organizations and diversity within organizations will bolster a diverse community of cell and gene therapy leaders, as we progress and advance within the field. And so, going to your question about what can we expect in 2025 for Grow, we've been working on, with our board and with other advisors on how to refine our Grow program to maximize its reach and impact, within the sector. And so we've introduced a new model that aims to give a more tailored and focused experience for each Grow cohort. And so our application process will open on October 8th, which is tomorrow, with our early selection taking place on December 15th, and then our final deadline on February the 15th. Again, we had 16 companies participate last year, and we really hope to grow the number of hosts for Grow interns in the future. And so with regard to your last question about what can listeners do, spread the word. Mm-hmm. Please share on social media. If you're not an ARM member, I urge that you consider becoming an ARM member, but talk to your human resources team about how you can get involved in this critically important program, because it is our responsibility to shape the future in cell and gene therapy, and we want it to be as diverse as possible. And that's, from a background perspective, industry perspective, the areas of study, all of those things. Grow is just wildly important, to ensuring that diversity that we know is critical for the sector.
Good. And when this podcast airs, there will be plenty of time for our listeners to, like you said, spread the word, become our members if they aren't, and perhaps even participate in the program by sponsoring a student. So that would be great. So listeners, you know what to do. And that's about it. So Rita, thank you so much for your time and for all the insight you shared with me. I know this has been a great event. What do you think of the new venue?
Oh, I think the venue is fantastic. Of course, I'm a little biased because I'm a part of ARM. But what I will say is, I think anyone who was on site last year really appreciates the additional space.
Correct. Yeah.
We were growing out of this space, which frankly is a good thing.
Yeah.
But excited to have more space, and it's also a beautiful space as well.
It's a beautiful space, great architecture, plenty of places to move around, to sit. To your point, just more real estate to have meetings and sessions and partnering meetings. So Carlsbad was fantastic, no question. But it's a good problem to have, to outgrow your space, and we're loving Phoenix so far. So this is great.
Wonderful. I first of all, just thank you again for inviting me, Erin, and looking forward to talking more about some of the advancements that in the cell and gene therapy sector next year when we meet again at Mesa.
Good. All right, Rita, thanks for your time.
Thank you.